present. I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 4:34 on March 9th. So we will start with our, where's my agenda? Oh, there it is. We will start with our Pledge of Allegiance and the salute to New Mexico flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera del Estado de Nuevo México, el símbolo Zia de amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas. And the acknowledgement of tribal land. We acknowledge that our Board of Education meeting is taking place on occupied indigenous land. We acknowledge the Tesuque Pueblo lands and other tribal lands on which we stand. We honor these people, past, present, and future. We acknowledge the history and ongoing colonization of where we are sitting right now in New Mexico and our country. We acknowledge our own place in the story of colonization. Thank you. Next on the agenda is, next item is the approval of the agenda. Superintendent, do we have some changes to make?
We do have a couple of changes. We would like to propose moving up the presentation from RBC immediately after the discussion of board priorities under Roman numeral 5, if that's the pleasure of the board. And then just wanted to make note under board announcements and follow-ups, this is where we would include the student board member updates as well. The student board member updates? Yep.
All right, noting those changes, do I have a motion to approve?
We'll move approval of the agenda as amended.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or otherwise? All right, we have approved the agenda with those changes. Next item is that we are going to be moving into executive session. Secretary Abeyta.
Madam President, I would move that we go into executive session where we will discuss threatened or pending litigation and also have discussion of the purchase, acquisition, or disposal of real property.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, anyone opposed? Okay, we're moving into executive session, and we will be back here at 5:30. Thank you.
What do we need in executive session?
I don't think we need anything.
This video contains flashes and moving images.
Test, test, test. I want to see if this thing will come down now, but I don't know which button is for this one. I'm scared to push it and mess both of them up, so it's not worth it. Because if that one go up, yeah. Ruth, you got a new laptop? Oh my goodness, look at you.
I feel like I've entered the modern world.
I bet you were like, oh, this is so
It is, oh, it's nice, fast, really, I didn't realize how much that.
That's why I've been trying to convince you all this time.
Oh my God, it's all clean and pretty.
Yeah. It's funny, I go through it with the teachers and they're just, they're like standing by it. And then I'll see them like 3 days later and they'd be like, you were so right, Roger. I don't even know how I lived my life before. Yeah.
When you recommend it.
Yeah, especially when they have those old 10, 11-year-old Mac Pros.
Oh, yeah, get attached to it.
Yeah, you have to pry it out of my dead hands. Who do I need to call? Like no one.
Who do I need to call to tell you that you're wrong?
Yeah.
That's right, no one.
I know Neil. Okay, give him a call then. I guarantee you, we are not hit push and testing, and then make whatever, you can slide it, make it whatever adjust.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your patience while we finished up in executive session. We are back. Secretary Abeta.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we come out of executive session where we discuss threatened or pending litigation, and there was discussion of the purchase, acquisition, or disposal of real property as noted on the agenda. And no action was taken. Thank you.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of returning from executive session, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. We're back. And next is introduction of the interpreter.
Thank you, Board President Bozé. Deputy Superintendent Romero, please.
Para asistencia de traducción en español, la señora Chávez te ayudará. Gracias.
Thank you very much. And next, we have our school board showcase. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Bozé. With us tonight is El Dorado Community School.
Camino.
El Camino Community School, I'm sorry. And with us tonight is Mr. Morano here? There he is. Mr. Morano, who is the supervisor of El Camino Real Middle School, and will introduce our educators.
Superintendent Chavez, Board President Bozé, and members of the board, gives me great pleasure to introduce to you this evening our art director for Santa Fe Public Schools, Ms. Cristina Gonzalez.
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, it is my honor to introduce art teachers from El Camino Real Academy who will be sharing images of student work, and I'm going to quickly turn it over to them so we can stay on schedule.
Madam President, members of the board, and Superintendent Chavez, the middle school art program at El Camino Real Academy is focused on art and community. Santa Fe is an incredible resource for arts education, and yet many of our students have limited awareness of this part of their community. We are dedicated to making our school art classes the bridge to these important cultural resources and career options. At the start of this school year in September, our 7th and 8th grade artists visited Site Santa Fe. There they explored the artwork of Jeffrey Gibson, a Native American contemporary artist.
We extended our field trip with a visit to Thoma Foundation Art Vault, where students learned about the world of digital art. At site and back at school, our students created their own art in response to what they saw. Meanwhile, 6th graders visited the Museum of Contemporary Native Art to learn about indigenous fashion design on a field trip arranged through the Artworks program. Then they created their own wearable art costumes and masks, which were shown at the city's community gallery. We also visited the Museum of International Folk Art to see the Cartoneria show of Mexican art and explored the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture. Now, students are working with folk art museum artists to make their own Cartoneria sculptures, which will be shown at the museum, just like this amazing show from last year. And we will get a special visit from the Axel Contemporary Art Truck with the Cartoneria exhibit linked to the museum show later this spring.
A recent project with some of our older students focused on transforming violence. With the help of New Mexicans for Gun Violence Prevention, students created a memorial to youth recently killed by guns, which is on display in the lobby here. Next, they studied the art of Pedro Reyes, an artist who transforms guns into musical instruments, and took a field trip to Site Santa Fe to see the newly opened exhibit of his work in person. They further explored the concept of transformation and material as message by making paper, which they turned into recycled art journals with an artist from We Grow Eco, which was funded through the ArtSmart Visiting Artist Program. Other partners planned for this year include O'Keefe Museum, Real Fathers, and Santa Fe Community College. What a wealth of creativity. Through these experiences, our students build connections to their city as well as explore their own ideas and identities through art. How can we, in Santa Fe Public Schools, make sure that all students know that this city and its culture belong to them? I want to thank our leadership team at El Camino, Principal Gord, Assistant Principal Ortega, and Assistant Principal Sperry, who are here with us tonight. And I also want, as a visual representation of how our students are held by this amazing Santa Fe arts community, to recognize our partners that are here tonight and ask them to stand. We have Matthew Contos with Site Santa Fe, Kemily Gomez with Museum of International Folk Art, Kathleen Richards with Art Vault and Toma Foundation, Notafon Ma with the Museum of Contemporary Native Art, Marita Hines with the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture, Matthew Chase Daniels with Axel Contemporary. And then we have the organizations that help us get artists into the classroom. We have Sarah Mandala and Jacob Martinez from ArtSmart, Claire LaRose and Lucy Rani from Artworks, Deborah Bolt with Real Fathers, Chauncey Foster with We Grow Eco, and Paul Lafrancois with Lanel Foundation. All of these folks have touched our students in this year with their amazing programs and support, and we so appreciate their support being here with us tonight. Thank you all.
I neglected to name the teachers, so let me do that before you all step away. Carol Schrader has taught middle school art at El Camino Real Academy for the past 4 years. She also managed Wise Fool Circus and previously taught at Santa Fe Community College for a decade. Amber Pasibi is an art teacher from San Antonio, Texas. She has taught art with Santa Fe Public Schools at Agua Fria Elementary and El Camino Real Academy for 11 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. If we could also please have those principals from that wonderful school stand up so we could clap for you. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Board Member Noble.
Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you to the leadership of El Camino Real for being here, and thank you to all the community partners. It's really great to see you all. That was an incredibly brief romp through some of what's happened, and really appreciate all of the work you all do in the art department and seeing the connection to community. It really is just what makes this all worthwhile. So thank you so much, and let us know how we can keep this going and make your lives easier and make these connections stronger in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Anderson. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say this is incredible. I don't have the familiarity with El Camino Real that Board Member Noble does representing it, but I do have lots of friends and loved ones who love El Camino, and so I, by extension, love El Camino. But I just wanted to say how incredibly impressed I was with how relevant this art is to the students and to their daily lives. My kids love art. It's something that keeps them going to school, but I think really creating that connection to the students and to their lives is really incredible. So thank you to the art team at El Camino Real, and also thank you to all of the community partners who have made that happen. And thank you for making those connections. I think that's really important to make those connections out in the community. Thank you. Thank you all. That's wonderful. Next up, we have some board discussion and possible action. The first thing we will be talking about is reimagining. Board Member Noble.
Thank you very much, President Bose. We, of course, continue with the reimagining process led by the inimitable Dr. Veronica C. Garcia, who is here tonight with some members of the team. Dr. Hyde, good to see you as well. And really, just to say, this continues to be a very dynamic project. And I know that all of the board members are engaged in a variety of ways and would just want to encourage you all to keep thinking about how this can be better and evolve to meet the needs and the things that are arising as you see new and gather new information in your work. So I think with that, Superintendent, if I should introduce Dr. Veronica Garcia, who is, of course, our former superintendent, a former cabinet secretary for the Department of Education, and currently our strategist and leader around the reimagining process. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. See if I know how to do this from this side. Mr. Superintendent, Madam President, members of the board, and staff, audience, it's good to be here. With me, of course, is Dr. Sheila Hyde, one of the co-project managers for this project. So you have two documents in front of you. The first...
Dr. Garcia, if I could just interrupt you for
Yes.
one moment. I know you're used to that. But to our student board members, part of the reason President Bose wanted us to have this at this meeting is so that you all can continue to engage and give us your thoughts and that sort of thing. So we did actually, with President Bose's leadership, intentionally put this here for you. So hope you will listen carefully and ask good questions and add great thoughts as ever. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and at any time, any of you, please feel free to interject, okay? I always like to start with the end to kind of let you know, how I do. It's like, okay, I want you to have the whole picture of what we're doing. So I'm going to give you a high-level overview of the phase one of this project, the inquiry phase, which was the survey with the 4 questions. So I'm going to go over that. And then there's a smaller document that sort of gives you, backtracks. It gives you an overview of how we're structured, what's happened thus far philosophically, how we're moving forward, and what you can expect next. And I'm going to try to do that in about 12 to 15 minutes. And if you can kind of tell me when every 5 or so. And then Dr. Hyde is going to focus more in depth on what's happened around student engagement. And again, apropos of our student board members being here tonight. So she will be focusing on that and has done some really excellent work. And you'll hear more about the board, how all of you have been engaged in this process. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So you'll have time to read this. For the audience to know, there will be a community update release that will happen after the steering committee next week, and these documents will then be posted on the website, so people will have access to all of this information at that time, okay? Is my understanding how we're proceeding from this. Okay. So just as you all remember, 4 questions: what's working, what's not working, how do you want things to be, and what's getting in the way. We looked at just about every stakeholder group that we have in this community, from staff to students to business leaders. The CRC participated. The methodology for reviewing the data, we did a Delphi sort, right, where you take the items and you start getting them to fall into groups to identify themes. We had all 3 of us, Dr. Lujan, Dr. Hyde, and myself, looked at every single response, if you can believe it, to help sort and to ensure inter-rater reliability. we had 732 respondents. That's different than responses, respondents, okay? And from that, we can break it down. You can see by subgroup. Each response was sorted, categorized, and then we also disaggregated the themes, but then we also aggregated the themes. So we try to look at each question and see, were there common themes from all the subgroups? Does that make sense to all of you? All right. So looking at the first question, and I'm just going to hit a few highlights from that. What's working? Just overwhelmingly, we heard about teachers and staff. That's what was working. People were very happy with that. We heard a lot of positivity about the schedule and student opportunities. Also, some of the new ways of communicating, now that you have a new website, Remind, and other kinds of communication systems, we heard positive comments about that, as well as technology and what was available in the classrooms. Information technology, digital learning were also key things about what was working. Then, the board also, if you want to look at yourselves of what came through when I interviewed all of you, standards-based instruction, early childhood center, career technical ed, those were the kinds of things that people said were working. When we looked at question 1 and looked at all the subgroups, the two themes that came out of that were teachers and staff and opportunities for students. And so, there's a lot of great things that are happening for our kids in the district. What's not working, and again, you got to look at the responses and the N size, okay? So that is a limitation. So when you see, for example, standards-based grading, that's only 8 responses. And that is a limitation of the study, is by subgroup, you have some low N sizes, okay? So, and we knew that was going to happen. So this is a toe in the water to get a general theme. For 6 responses schedule. Yet, on the other hand, we had people that said, I've used 5 minutes, that, standards-based grading was great and the schedule was great. So, people, that's not to not be expected. Other site-based staff, there were no themes that emerged. Principals, we only had, and APs, we only had 11 that responded. And some of the things they talked about there were Friday early dismissal and student apathy, for example. Discipline, was an overall, theme that came up. Teachers' needs being met. Equity and opportunity, was another area. What was also interesting, for example, the business leaders, when they talked about staffing or insufficient focus on the trades or wraparound services, sometimes people just don't know what's in place. And I think that is a central theme that has come out from all of the discussions, is that people only know what they know. And we've got to figure out more creative ways of people really understanding what is available, because it's really, when you start breaking it down, quite phenomenal of what's happening in the district. So when we aggregated it all, of the 732 respondents, we only needed 10%, right? That was what we used as the benchmark to have a theme emerge. No themes emerged. So there was no consistency amongst looking at everyone in the aggregate. We'll go on now to question 3, how would you like things to be? And what was fascinating about that is people know what they know. And again, I think as we move into more research and we look at getting out and having more, presenting, like what are your thoughts about this particular means of instruction, or how can we better organize middle grade education? You have to give people, fodder, right? And so, because they know what they know, and at the time, they weren't thinking creatively. And so I think that was an issue around how would you like things to be? However, teachers, We had 33 responses, or 16%, and it was treatment as professionals for the people that did respond. But for the most part, we don't have themes emerging. General maintenance talked about pay and transportation, volunteers. But again, look at the responses, 2 responses, 2 responses. I'm really hesitant to really even, talk about them, but they are there. For the board, that I talked to, student engagement, parental engagement, project-based learning, and more magnet programs was something that emerged from the board. The CRC, more students at proficiency. I think, we would all want that, right? Sustainability and environmental education integrated into the instruction, more collaboration across content areas, students taught life skills. But when we looked at all 732, no themes emerged. What's getting in the way? So it was, it was interesting because if you recall, remember I told you what's working was staffing. So for another group, it was, that's not working. But it's a different take, and it's insufficient staffing, lack of teacher support, lack of respect for teachers, that sort of thing. And then here, student opportunities. And when we look at some of the things that people are talking about, it's like so many of these things we do have in place. So again, it goes back to communicating, right? We had 10% of teachers, had concerned about the schedule. They don't like more planning time. But then other people say too many PLCs. So again, it's a little bit contradictory there. So question 4, what's getting in the way? No themes emerged. So I think, it gave us a place to start, but there was something that I did want to talk about, and I don't have it on my, do you have it on yours do you have yours? The big one? Because I did want to talk about like outliers just real quick. And, these were like, oh, here, I have it. Sorry, Sheila. It wasn't like, well, I want to say just 2 more things about the study. I'm sorry, I lost the pages and now I have them. Making sense of the data and what we got out of that. And, typically when stakeholder groups are really concerned, and you've all seen it as board members, right? If there is a major issue, people are really dissatisfied, they don't hesitate to let you know, right? They come out of the woodwork, they respond to the surveys. If we were changing the schedule, the survey response rate is like way high, or this room is packed. And so I think that tells us something, that people are somewhat satisfied, right, with how things are going. The adage, people know what they know, also seemed to play here. So we did create a research subcommittee. I'll talk about that in a minute, to bring innovative ideas to the steering committee and for future focus groups. I talked about, areas that emerged, standards-based grading. We talked it would be worth engaging a group of teachers to work out bugs and just kind of like a continuous improvement process. But again, it's communication. And again, we go back to that. Special education services, the superintendent has already had one big meeting and convening. I think another one is planned, I think relatively soon. And also just to remember that there are so many federal and state statutes that prescribe how and what you do. And then, of course, communication. And, the district received mostly high marks for communication, which I think was really great. But obviously, we need to let people know what we're doing. In this area where I talk about meriting consideration, they're the onesies and twosies, but sometimes there might be a really great idea there. And so the steering committee will take a look at these areas, for example, transportation to games and clubs or to plays and dances. That might require grant because that's not funded right in the funding formula, but I think it's interesting. Ungraded K-3 programming. What about a Montessori magnet? That came up. Too many buildings, not enough students, we're aware of that. ESL programming, newcomer schools, better different clubs, expanding the social emotional learning network, which I think we've all identified as important. Community schools, middle school, expansion of electives and redesign, school calendar, expansion of out-of-school time opportunities. So those were the onesies. Now, when I say onesies, very low, but still I thought they were interesting ideas that merited thought. So let me just tell you a little bit now, if you go to the next document, a quick update. So where we've been and where we're going. The first steering committee meeting we didn't meet actually and get organized till October 20th. We've met every month, so we've only had 5 monthly meetings thus far. The agendas are developed by the executive committee. On the executive committee is, at the time, was Board President Noble, Board Member Noble, Superintendent Chavez, and myself. We've completed Phase 1A of the inquiry process, and we're actually now deep into Phase 1B of the inquiry process, which will include or does include individual meetings, in-depth focus groups. We'll probably have larger interest-based either summit or conversations, focus surveys, and push and pull polling. Subcommittees formed thus far are the executive, and our goal is to provide oversight, build agendas, and so on. Communication, the goal there is to better provide stakeholder updates and engage more constituents in the process. Policy goal is to develop, and then a policy committee with the goal to develop and vet policy recs before they are presented to the steering committee and to the board for your consideration. A guiding principle and key decision point, and I really want to emphasize this, it's super important, that because the work's dynamic, organic, non-linear, which is hard for people that like a linear process, and ongoing, it was decided that the steering committee not develop a final report, but rather as recommendations and policies, resolutions, or practices are developed by subcommittee and the steering committee as a whole, they will be brought to the board for consideration. So it's not going to be like one big reveal with 10 policies, but as we develop them, they'll be coming to the board for your consideration. And I think some will be coming sooner than later. The Board of Ed is engaged in the reimagining process, and just to give you an idea there, research, student engagement, Native American student and family engagement. Dr. Hyde is working with President Bose. They're curating research on various topics, and the goal there is to provide the steering committee an expanded perspective on educational transformation and reimagination to better inform its work. Various pieces of research and scholarly journal articles have been given to the committee. Some we've discussed. We did an in-depth deep dive into the Mississippi reform. We also looked at Think New Mexico's reform agenda and had discussions about that. Dr. Lujan is working with Vice President Sasha Anderson on garnering feedback from Native American students and families. The goal there is to bring to the board a policy rec for improved student and family engagement for Indigenous populations. Under student engagement, I first met with board members Gonzalez and Abeta to discuss a methodology to garner student input. Dr. Hyde and I met with board member Abeta with the Boys and Girls Club leadership to discuss a general strategy, and Dr. Hyde is leading the effort to garner more input. And again, the goal there is to bring a policy rec for more formalized and systematic way to ensure that student input is garnered on a regular basis. And going forward with Phase 1B, is the purpose of this research phase, again, is to gather more focused feedback from stakeholders via face-to-face meetings, surveys, perhaps facilitated large group interest-based community conversation, and push and pull polling. So before I stand for questions, I'd like Dr. Hyde to then now talk about some of the work that she's doing around student engagement.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia, Superintendent Chavez, Board President Bose, board members and staff. Good to see you all. I won the jackpot with this project because I got to work with some students. As an educator, that's always the best part. And so I want to give you highlights about what we've been doing. As Dr. Garcia mentioned, the board really wanted to know what kind of policies could be put in place to really make sure that the board is engaging students, giving students the voice that they need to look at policies and what really happens in their world. So a couple of things happened. We took a field trip to the Boys and Girls Club, and the teen center at the mall. I had no idea it was there. It was such an exciting thing, and I just kept creating opportunities to go back there because it was so great to see what the Boys and Girls Club had developed there. As a result, I visited with a young man named Jake, who they call the Teen Whisperer over there, and we worked together to find ways that we could really survey the students that were coming into the teen center to find out what their thinking is about their world in school. And Jake and others suggested that we kind of sweeten the pot a little bit, so we are giving movie tickets as an incentive to fill out our survey. And the survey was developed by the students. There's a group at the Teen Center called Keystone. They're their leaders there. So we worked with them and said, here's what we think we want to know. Now you put it in your language so we can then ask the students. So that's what they did. And so we've developed a Spanish version and an English version. The movie tickets, I hope, come in this week. And as soon as they do, they will be offering those students, and we hope to get about 125 to 150 students to answer the survey. A lot of them come from charter schools, and what we really wanted to know too is, so why did your family pick the charter school? What does the charter school provide you? We asked them questions about, so are there adults at the school that you feel like you can talk to? Do you believe that there are instructional materials that honor your culture and your identity? So we have about 14 questions that the students helped us develop, and one of those certainly is, how can the board really offer you a voice in what happens in your schools? So we hope to provide that data soon. It'd be really fascinating to see what those students come back with. The other place we are getting student feedback really are from your board members, your student board members. I've spent a little bit of time with 2 of the 3, hope to get to the 3rd one soon. And we really talked a lot about their ideas about what could really happen in terms of students saying, here's what we think should happen in our schools. And so we'll be coming back to you with some of their notions and ideas. I love what I was a little disappointed when Dr. Garcia told me I couldn't really spill the beans on what they recommended, because that's going to be the most exciting part of our presentation next. So stay tuned for more information from our students, and I look forward to seeing it myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hyde, and I mean, I guess it's up to you if you want to spill the beans, but I think we should meet with the steering committee and share some of that and vet it through our regular process, but we're ready to stand for any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia and Dr. Hyde. Any questions from the board or student board members? Please go ahead.
Hey, I would really like to get in contact with these Keystone people at the teen center at the mall. Or they seem like some really good people to talk to for specifically my ideas, perhaps. But yeah, if I could somehow get in contact with them, that would be nice.
We'll see what we can do. I'm sure we can make that happen.
All right. Let's see. I'm curious about other stuff, so I'll let you know when it comes to me.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Yes, Board Member Noble.
I want to, first of all, acknowledge a steering committee and communications committee member, Maya Del Margo, who is in the audience. Thank you for being here. And just to say that the communications committee, I think, was the first one to form. I believe that's right. And Dr. Garcia, I don't know if you want to give any summary there, but I really appreciate how Maya and other members of the steering committee on communications have really doubled down on the importance of getting the message out and have identified how hard that is and how much people don't know about what is offered in the Santa Fe Public Schools. And, you know, I think it's sort of summed up in what Dr. Garcia puts in some of the sort of key takeaway piece in the big document, or as she said a few times, people don't know what they don't know, and it's very much that. And you know, it's a busy time of life, and that's true for members of the steering committee who are showing up and volunteering, and those that are taking on these additional work groups or subcommittees are doing more. And even the folks who took the time to answer the survey, and everybody, every one of us is trying to fit all the things in. And so figuring out how to share information well, because the fact is, as we've seen many times before, if there's some sort of issue, threat, or crisis, people will come out like crazy. But the generative process of trying to make something better and really do creative work is difficult, and then sharing that out and iterating it and getting feedback is even more difficult. So just to acknowledge that work, I want to appreciate it and say that that is a piece I think we will continue to wrestle with as we go forward, because it's just very difficult to engage folks, to do the bringing people along, and you know, we sort of imagine that the information will get out perfectly and people will understand it perfectly, and then we'll move on. But in reality, it's hard, and this level of community work is difficult. Dr. Garcia, I don't know if you want to chime in.
Yes, Mr. Superintendent, Madam President, members of the board, and Board Member Noble, you know, the committee has been awesome. It's just been difficult, you know, to gather the information, for example, making sure that they can contact all of the PTO, PTA presidents, and they also have other networks that they can communicate with that we can't as a school district. But we're also trying to focus, and they give us great ideas. You know, I couldn't go over everything that we've been doing, but for example, we've been trying to engage parents who have chosen charter schools to find out, you know, why that might be the case. And we're also working to try to see if we can communicate with people that have chosen private education to just, you know, find out, you know, kind of what their thinking was about that, or what their perceptions of the district might be. So they've been great, you know, because it may not always be work that they're doing direct communication, but they're also giving us ideas that then the two co-project managers or myself will then engage with a particular subgroup to get more data. And there'll be more in-depth Phase 1B report once, you know, at a certain point of some of the findings from talking to these different constituencies about some of their choices they're making about their district or perceptions.
Dr. Gonzalez?
President Bose, Secretary. I'm like in someplace else, I think. Senator, yeah, want to do that. Anyway, I am just really happy to hear all of the student engagement. That was one of the things that I really wanted to see, to hear student voices, because they're the ones that are right in the middle of it, and they know what they don't always know what they need, but they know what they want. And so I'm happy to hear that.
And thank you. And also on that point, if I may, is that the committee that Vice President Anderson is working on is also engaging student voice, looking at Indigenous students through that cultural lens of, how they can also interact with us or with you in a more meaningful way.
Thank you. Mr. McGinnis.
Thank you. I just have a few semi-technical questions. I was just wondering about why is 10% the cutoff for finding an aggregate theme? Is that an arbitrary cutoff, or is there a methodology for determining that?
That's somewhat of a common kind of low number, low ballpark, especially with such a small n size, to come up with an aggregate. If we went much higher, we wouldn't have had anything. We wouldn't have gotten any. And I think I do put in the report that it is a limitation of the study. Although 730 total responses isn't bad, but when you look at it by subgroup, you're getting very small, and so that is just something that people have to look at it. However, this was kind of a broad stroke. It is what it is. We're using it as a broad stroke, toe in the water. We know that as we get more, so we're not going to run off and make a policy decision based on, one subgroup's responses. But as we continue to collect data and more focus group, we'll be able to see, again, more emergent themes. And then as we decide, for example, we know that we're losing kids, right, either because of birth rates, right, in the early grades. But we also know there may be some things that might mitigate that. Not raising the birth rate, but where they're choosing to go. I don't think we can help with the other. But in terms of middle grade education, as we know, statistically, that's where we're losing kids, right? They're choosing, once they hit middle school, to leave us. And so it makes it real clear that we have to look at middle grade education, right? How can we better offer a delivery system that maybe we can keep our kids or attract some that are leaving us?
I have one more question.
Yes,
Are there
sir.
any other types of qualitative analysis that you can do besides the Delphi store on this data, or is that
Well, there are software, but it's basically doing the same thing, because qualitative analysis by its nature is just making sense of the data. And so we did look at, what was one of them? Can't think of the name of the software.
Deduce.
We looked at Deduce, we looked at some others. Unless you have thousands and thousands of data points, but even at that, you have to read them and code them and put them in. So for the N size that we had, and then there are some programs that use artificial intelligence. With education, it's so nuanced that we thought, given the N size, we decided to do it the way we did it, which is basically a gold standard in qualitative analysis.
Awesome. That's really cool. I was wondering, is it possible for us to do another study like this that just has a larger N size? Because I think it'd be really interesting if you did this with 2,000 or 3,000 data points, so you could make stronger conclusions.
I think that when we, for example, when there are, and I was going to say Dr. Noble just gave you a degree, when about push and pull polling, and I don't know if you know what that means, but it's sort of taking two things, if you had to pick what's more important for you, where your kid goes to school or more options, or I'm just making something up. But I believe that, for example, if we come up with interesting notions about how to deliver middle grade education. When I say middle grade, I'm not just talking middle schools, I'm talking K-8s that have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, right? And what we're doing there. Then that's going to pique people's interest. And they're more, you're probably going to see a higher N size. Or, I don't know, something of how you configure certain schools. I'm just throwing stuff out there. I have no idea. But when it's something that touches you and affects you personally, or if we talked about the school day, the school year, you're going to see a larger number. It could be that if we talk about something that's really a hot topic for students, you probably will see higher responses. But I think, so.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Let's see.
Very good questions. Thank you.
Somewhat in the same vein, would it be possible for me to promote this study? Like, or has it already concluded or
This particular phase, we are done. However, to be able to engage students, we would love to have focus groups to discuss some of the ideas that have come up, because students have come up with some pretty phenomenal ideas, right? Of things that they think could make a difference. So it would be wonderful to have some community conversations with students, and you guys could very much help promote that. And it takes process, right? Time to build relationships and for you guys to know us. And, we're building relationships with the students, with the Teen Center. But we would love to have in-depth conversations. And if you have ideas of, timing and where and how, because I'd like to be able to talk to kids who are in sports and kids who are in various, like, whether you're in drama or you're in debate or you're in student government, or maybe you're not involved in anything. And why aren't you? And what would get you involved? Or, why aren't you involved? So yes, we would love to do that with you.
And these two have given us good ideas already.
Yeah, and Dr. Hyde says you've already given them given her really great ideas.
Or yes, or my question more was like, but yes, that sounds good. But would it be possible for, like, how about just sending an email with a Google form or something to?
And that's what we'll do again, because that's how this went out, and there were some reminders. But, I get it that students, get a lot of email, and perhaps this, but if we had people on the inside saying this is coming, right, then I think we might get better, higher response rates.
Like, I'm just imagining, like, sending an email to one of my friends, like, hey, could you do me a quick favor? Just, like, fill out this survey.
Exactly.
It would, like, help, it might help improve our schools if you just, like, give some feedback. So, yeah, that kind of thing. Gotcha. Let me know when that's happening, all right?
We've got it.
We definitely will. We have you on speed dial.
Anybody else? Vice President Anderson?
Thank you so much. This is so helpful and really, really interesting to see. I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. First, I wanted to say I really enjoyed being in the Community Review Committee when you did this exercise with us. I thought it was really fascinating. I mean, I've been sitting in those meetings for a year, and I feel like I'm kind of getting to know everyone's interests and thoughts about the schools, but it was really eye-opening to see some of the things that they called out that they really thought were working. I thought that was really excellent, and it made me really happy. And then I'm really excited that you're talking to folks who are sending their kids to private and charter schools. I think that's really critical feedback and ties right back into that communications piece. Lots of, I don't know, lots of friends who send their kids to charters and private, but some that I know just don't know what we have. And I have heard this story, and I know at least one other board member has heard this story, that there was a parent of a student who they just signed their contract for private school and found out that they didn't offer a certain class, and then talked to the principal of a public school and found out that they did indeed offer that class at the public school that they didn't offer at the private school. So if we can catch those folks before they leave the district, then all the better, and I think communication is key to that. So starting my couple of questions, I love these recommendations that you have put here, or the issues emerged that appear to require administrative attention. And I wonder, and I also like the fact that you're going to come to us throughout the process rather than just issuing one end result. That seems to me to be a lot more actionable and to be a lot more true to the process. And there are things that we can do now with this board that we may or may not be able to do in the future. What do you think are the best next steps that we should take when we get a recommendation, or even just some information that makes us say, maybe we should act on that? Like, for example, the communication piece, is there a way for the board to be involved in helping that along, or any of these other pieces what do you see as the board's role in making these things happen? And you have a really good understanding of what a board's role is, too.
Mr. Superintendent, Madam President, members of the board, you know, that's a sort, probably would be a nuanced answer, because I think it depends on what it is. And I believe when we think about communication and trying to get stakeholder input, you all have constituencies as well, right? And you all have your own networks of people that communicate with you in various ways. So that might be some way through the communications committee that we can feed to Board Member Noble, who is, on the executive committee, to bring back to the board to say, this is a question that, we're trying to get more input, right? Student board members and others. And, there's a survey coming, or there'll be a focus group on this date, or a virtual town hall, please attend and get your input. So I think that might be a way. That I would imagine the superintendent probably has ideas of what he might think, or the board president, or just members of the board. You all probably have different ideas, but you have a built-in constituency that I think communicates with you and that you communicate with that I think could be very helpful.
Let's see. I was wondering about age demographics, like what ages is this appropriate to ask a middle schooler to fill out?
We thank you. We went from 6th grade through 12th.
6th grade, all right. Let's see. So yeah, then parents, grandparents, all those good people. All right.
Thank you, Board President Bose and Superintendent and members of the board. So looking under the outlier comments which merit consideration, and looking at the asterisk comment, too many buildings and not enough students and declining enrollment, like as you've noted, this was mentioned specifically in the reimagining solution. And I know that lots of folks are eager to sort of hear what the reimagining committee and the reimagining process have to say about this, because it remains a concern. I mean, obviously there are parents sending their kids to schools thinking, is this school going to be open next year? Or, what are they going to decide with this reimagining process? And I just wonder how much that's being discussed by the steering committee, or the ways in which it will come out in the future. So
I think I can say with a certain amount of certainty that there's no list of schools that's going to come out of the steering committee, to say we're closing schools X, Y, Z, but rather a more generic policy about certain levers that would need to be considered in a timeline for when there would be a reconfiguration or closure of a school. With that said, as work continues and there are plans for how you might deliver program, that could have implications for that, right? But it isn't the role of the steering committee to name certain schools that, should be closed. So nobody should be looking for or holding their breath, right, that there's going to be this recommendation for school, A, B, and C. But we will be working with the policy committee it'll be vetted by the steering committee and then the superintendent. And then you'll have your normal process for that policy coming to the board. About how do you deal with that, and what are those levers, and what would be the timeline, because we have a unique situation right now with the state, and I say unique because it's not always. I mean, I think it was in the 80s where we were like super flush and lots of money, right, with the schools. I mean, usually we're cutting. I mean, my tenure here, we were cutting, always cutting. Even when they gave us more money, we were cutting. And so now, we're not necessarily, not that you're super flush, but we're not in that situation either. And so it doesn't appear that we are, have the heat on that you have to make these decisions, and parents don't have time to plan, and they have the rug pulled out from under them. And I think that's the intent of having a policy that is not tied to high emotion and everything else because a school is closing in a few months or the following year or whatnot. So I think it's a good time, and that was one part of the resolution. So it's not like it's not going to be addressed, but it's not like there's going to be that's not the role of the steering committee to recommend school X, Y, or Z. I mean, there are other mechanisms for that, and this policy would be the framework for that, if you adopt it.
If I may on that point.
Yes, please.
It comes up a lot. It's hard to avoid, and I think I really appreciate that the steering committee has really worked to say, okay, we're going to think about possibility, we're going to think about values, and work through the research and the process, as Dr. Garcia has outlined, while not necessarily shying away from how this might work, as Dr. Garcia just outlined. But, we have really made an effort to stay true to the reimagining resolution that acknowledges, but also says this is a unique time where we can do other things. So, again, I appreciate that. I think we're looking with eyes wide open at the declining enrollment issue and what we need to do, but really trying to think about, these things like relevance for students and engagement, and looking at where some of the bigger holes are in our system and potentially focus our work in that way, or opportunities as well. So there's been a lot of thought about it, and sometimes it's hard to, keep on track and true to the spirit of the reimagining resolution, because that is always as a presence there. But, Dr. Garcia has outlined the process, is keeping us on track. And again, there may be some considerations for a policy as to how something like this might work, rather than, and certainly not, I would agree with Dr. Garcia, I do not think that the board will see a list or anything weird like that. But, hopefully we can figure out some mechanisms, methods to address this, and get really clear on how we might either stop the decline or, attract folks back from other areas by, and most of all, do better for the folks, the students that are in the Santa Fe Public Schools and the people that work here, so that we can improve the system and get off of the sort of slow strangulation mentality. And again, I just appreciate that everybody has held that, because it is challenging.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
All right. You said, let's see, you said 6th grade to 12th grade, but that got me wondering, what about college students and people even beyond that? I think the problem with interviewing current students is they don't have the full picture of the entire school experience. But what about asking people with that picture, maybe outreach to people who've already graduated? I feel like that could be some truly valuable insight.
It's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Any other questions, or? Yes, go ahead.
I haven't been able to meet with Dr. Hyde yet, and I know I have some ideas to get some more student input, but I just like that you guys specifically had this meeting where we were at the meeting so that we could hear all this, and I really appreciate that. I know that at our school we don't have the current standard-based grading in all of our classes, but I have it in one of my classes, and it is a bit confusing, but the more meetings that my teacher goes to, he's trying to explain it to us as well, so I think that's very helpful as well. And I just really appreciate everything you guys are doing for us, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, I think that's it. But yes, another thank you from me. I was fortunate enough to attend the steering committee meeting last month, and it was very informative, and I was really impressed by the discussions and the work that's coming out, and very, very, very grateful for everyone who's volunteering their time to get that work done. So thank you all.
Thank you, and I would say to the audience, the thousands that are watching, that steering committee, there will be a community update that will come out probably on Friday of the following week. Well, that's not spring break yet, is it? No, and because we're meeting next week. And we will, all of this will be on the website at that point, as well as the community update. So be watching for that and help us get that information out for people to watch for it. All right, thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garcia. All right.
Board President Bose.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
If I could just make a comment to Ms. Delmargo real quick.
Yes.
If she happens to go home and watch the meeting, she might come up under the action portion of the meeting under letter C, just so you know if you want to go back and watch that.
The next item on the board discussion and possible action here is regarding our budget priorities for next year. And I think we all got a little bit of a reminder 2 weeks ago to be thinking about budget priorities. And I think the superintendent has a few additional things to say about that.
Yeah, thank you, Board President Bose, members of the board. Just a few reminders. Last budget season, the board priorities, and I just want to put this out there again, this is just for us to start the conversation, start thinking about it, and then I'll outline a timeline here shortly. So some of the board priorities last budget season: social, emotional, and mental health of staff and students. And for those that may or may not know, we are developing wellness rooms at every one of our schools for our staff members, and we're offering yoga classes for district staff. I want to say it's twice a week at BF Young. So we're trying to really reach everyone. Address attendance and re-engagement of learning, enhancement of teaching and learning to further equity, employee increase in benefits, reimagining Santa Fe Public Schools, engagement and partnering with our community, and our Santa Fe Public Schools Human Resources Department. So those were the board priorities the previous year. And again, the timeline, again, is really around the next month or two. So the budget item will be placed as we're moving forward on agendas starting on 4/13, which is our next board meeting. The budget study session for this priority or for this agenda item would be on 4/20. Okay. And then we would have 2, potentially 3 regular board meetings after that study session prior to our submission date for approval. Usually our submission date's the 1st of June, so that gives us a little bit of time. April 11th through the 13th is the spring budget workshop, and at that time is when we start to hear about the unit value. We start to hear about the different requirements, program shifts, et cetera. So the spring budget workshop really provides us the platform, the foundation for the discussions to move forward. As of tomorrow, we'll complete our internal budget meetings. That is site and departments. So we're well ahead of that discussion point compared to last year, over a month. So we've had every school come in, we've had every department come in, and it concludes tomorrow. Again, the discussions are around projected enrollment, staffing levels, programmatic needs, as well as programmatic and site support. We've asked the schools also to start planning to discuss their budgets with their SACs or their school or student advisory committees around the use of federal funding such as title and federal stimulus. So that's, I know, something that we wanted to discuss last year about the inclusion of the SACs earlier on. So that's something that we've asked the schools to move forward with. So again, those timelines are for discussion, but I wanted to bring something to present to you guys as we move forward through budget season.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. So again, there's no need to name anything tonight, but please give this some good thought, especially considering what last year's priorities were and the things that we're dealing with this year. Yes, Board Member Noble.
So when will we discuss and potentially adopt board priorities for the budget in the process?
Board President Bose, I almost called you Noble, and that's why I paused. Members of the board, Board Member Noble. So this was the start of the discussion of board priorities. We can have that agenda item again next board meeting, but I think it's really around that study session, really delving deep into the board priorities, getting into the weeds of the entire budget process, and then coming back after we feel comfortable with that process to provide you guys a budget plan. So again, when we come back to the board after that study session, it's more of the overview, and I plan on going deep into the weeds during the study session.
So would it make sense then to have our priorities for the 4/13 meeting that can inform the 4/20 study session?
Sorry. Yes, we could start that discussion the next board meeting.
So if I may, I guess I'm a little uncomfortable here. This feels later. This is my 7th budget. And we're starting on some level in orienting the board as to where we are with the current SEG. Later than ever. We have not done that in March before. I believe, I mean, I could be wrong, but, and the board priorities usually do take 2 or 3 bites at the apple. In part, if this is our tickler to start thinking about it, I would appreciate if we could look at a list of what we did prioritize last year. And, you know, ultimately what we've done, I think every time in the past, is then put a list together and then refine it maybe at a later date. Which is helpful, and then doing that ahead of a deep dive, because that allows then the superintendent and the team to integrate those into some suggested arenas and frame. The budget frame has changed every year I've been on it. Maybe we will be following what we did last year, which was decent. But, you know, just to say, I think, and spring budget workshop is often the thing that is a little bit uncomfortable, because we start orienting the board as to what is the operational budget, what is the operating budget, what is the you know, the capital considerations and whatnot ahead. We've always done it well ahead of the spring budget workshop. And it looks like we have, from our other materials, an adjustment in the SEG that's come through. So anyway, and we have started generally in previous years to look at where we would be based on, you know, the SEG, especially once it's adjusted. So, yeah, and just to say, I don't necessarily know what to suggest, but, you know, to not really have a discussion on the budget until mid-April is, you know, and maybe because of the way things fall and the way spring break falls and the legislative session this year, we'll have time to still have the number of meetings we have, which is fine, so that what I'm thinking about when we start talking about the dates is slightly less relevant. But ultimately, and Superintendent, I appreciate that you said that then there are 2 or 3, which I do think is enough after that to potentially talk about it and not run uncomfortably up against the deadline, which is the end of June. Is that correct?
It's usually the beginning of June.
The beginning of
Yep.
June, okay. So, if we look at, and yeah, 6 weeks. Anyway, so I think it would be great to do what we can on the board priorities. And, if there's any information, Superintendent, that you can share of what our priorities were last year, and the status of them, whether they've been completed, because if they're priorities that were not completed, we might want to continue. We've done that in the past into the next year. But, just to raise some concerns about the time. And, I know, Superintendent, as I shared with you, that I'm feeling itchy and wanting a budget frame. So very eager to start orienting around that and having the conversation so that we can make sure to have enough time to do that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and Board President Bozay, members of the board. Yeah, I agree. I'll send out a list, give you status update of the list from last year. I think we'll also go into a few years back, just so we can give everybody else some, foundation of what what the priorities were in previous years as well. But yeah, I think great point, Board Member Noble, and then start bringing it back starting at our next board meeting, which is the 13th.
Yes, Vice President Anderson. Thank you so much, President Bose, Superintendent, and members of the board. I just wanted to share some of Board Member Noble's motivation to start jumping into the budget process. I think what would be ideal for me, so I feel like last year it was a little bumpy. I think this year we should probably plan on having at least 2 meetings to go over the budget rather than it being like a surprise to have the second meeting, because I always have a lot of questions and I always like to sit with them afterwards. And with something as big as the budget, I think it's really helpful to sit with it. In my ideal world, we would be able to have a study session where we talked with staff about our board priorities, but then also a study session where we have maybe not a proposed budget, but some outline, some frame that we could give feedback on before coming back with a presentation. I'm looking at our calendar and have no idea when that would possibly be. But last year, for example, I felt like the second presentation we received was much improved over the first, and I felt much more comfortable approving the budget. But there's still a part of me that really wants to dig into the numbers of, are we increasing music education, for example? Like, are we where are we shifting money in this year's budget versus last year's budget? Because that shows me where our priorities are. And I've only ever worked with, for-profit companies for the most part, and some nonprofits on boards. So I haven't seen budgets that are like our budget before, the numbers that our budget are and the buckets that everything goes in. But I've looked at a lot of budgets, and I feel like I'd love more detail than we necessarily received even last year, even though I felt like that was sufficient to approve the budget. But I'd love to be able to dig into that, and in order to be able to dig into that, I don't want it to have to be at that first meeting to come back 2 weeks later. So I don't know if there's a way to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Vice President Anderson, Board President Bozay. So I'm getting them. I didn't mess up entirely. But there's always that opportunity to schedule a special study session. So just because we have this tentative calendar, we always can add something on top of it or within, a week.
Yes.
If I can just follow up, Vice President Anderson, it sounds like, I said actually many similar things, including the thing about music education to the superintendent today. So, and we have not. And I partly want to make a comment so you know that we haven't talked, but we are just actually on the same page.
The last time I talked to Board President Noble, I sent her a funny meme, so. Board member.
Yes, the music education piece, I think what I said last year about the budget was like, I really want to have an understanding of how those numbers impact students in classrooms. And so I would love to have that level of detail and any discussion that we can have sooner rather than later over that. So now we are on to public forum. Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
We amended the agenda.
Okay.
And it is the presentation
Oh,
next.
yes, you're right.
Yep.
Up next is our presentation.
Thank you, Board President Bozé, members of the board. With us this evening, I'm getting my notes, you can come on up, is, let's see where it is. It might be on my other agenda, so I apologize. But it's Eric Kerrigan, is that it? Might be. Eric Kerrigan of RBC. He's going to go through tonight what the bond looks like, general obligation bond, ed tech note, some of the timelines, summaries, and some of the outlooks. So again, he's with us tonight as we're looking towards November. Of course, we have some re-elections, but we also have our Go Bond and ETN. So Mr. Is it Kerrigan? Harrigan, I apologize. Mr. Harrigan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Bonds, turn that on, as well as education technology notes, and then also do a little bit of planning ahead of the November election, as the district will need to go out for additional authorization to continue some of its programs. So on the first page of the presentation is a history of the district's assessed valuation. You've seen really strong growth in your AV this last year, over 8%. This is really terrific, as you'll kind of see as we get later on in the presentation. This helps to benefit your future capacity in your GEO bond program because it allows you to retire your debt quicker and continue to maintain your existing tax rate. On page 2 of the presentation, this is a history of the district's tax rates. The bonds and education technology notes that we'll be talking about tonight will continue to maintain those historical tax rates that the district has had in place for quite some time, of $4.28 roughly for your GEO bond program and $1.50 for your education technology notes. On page 3 of your presentation, we have all of your outstanding bonds that you currently have outstanding. We're going to talk about the bond issues that will be coming up. On page 4 of the presentation, so voters authorized $100 million in bonds in 2021. $30 million was sold in 2022, and I apologize, I have a couple of typos. So we will be selling $20 million in this upcoming sale of voter authorized bonds, and that will leave $50 million of remaining authorization to be sold over the next 2 years, at which time we'll be going back to voters for additional authorization. And as I mentioned, this will maintain the $4.30 tax rate. Additionally, we'll be issuing $11 million of education technology notes that were authorized by voters in March of 2019. In the amount of $11 million. The district has sold $44 million of that, and so this will be the last remaining of that voter authorization, and so the district would need to go back to voters in this November to continue that education technology note program. And again, the issuance of this ETN issuance, as well as the proposed election, will continue to maintain that $1.50 tax rate. So from an election timing standpoint, so since voters authorized the issuance of GEO bonds in 21, we would go back to voters in 2025. However, we estimate that the capacity will increase from 100 million to 140 million to be sold over a 4-year period, and that's a product of district having some of its debt being paid off, as well as the strong growth that the district has had in its tax base over the last few years. Additionally, the district can go back to voters in November of this year in the amount of $55 million for your education technology note program. as well as we would recommend the SB 9 mill levy also go to the November 2023 election. It was originally passed 2018, but because of the change in election law, you would have normally gone back to voters in February of 2024. However, to get on that cycle of every 6 years, so that the district doesn't have to pay to go to that election, we recommend renewing it at the November election of 2023 so that there's no lapse in that funding. Again, that's just a continuation of the program that the district has in place. And then the HB 33, which was authorized in 2021, we would recommend going back to voters in 2025 for that, to continue that program. We do have on page 6 kind of a high sort of level overview of the elections for both your SB 9, HB 33, ETN, and GO bonds. Again, like I mentioned, 140 million is what we anticipate will be the amount in 2025. Again, what happens to your tax base over the next couple of years will dictate that. If you're growing at around 3% a year, you should be able to go to voters with 140 million. We project in 2029 that amount to grow to slightly to 150 million. And then you can see the ETN amounts and when we recommend having your SB 9 and your HB 33 elections. Just from a timing perspective, to get on the November ballot, we will need to come back to the board to authorize the education technology note and the SB 9 to be placed on that election in the late spring, summer timeframe. So circling back to the general obligation bond and education technology note, we will be coming back to the board at your April meeting to actually adopt the resolution that authorizes the issuance of the bonds. Because of what I'll call the funny nature of the statute for education technology notes, it has a very tight time frame in which you have to authorize and then issue the bonds. And so we would price those bonds on May 11th as required under the education technology note statute. The board has to meet in special session, and we just recommend that occur 15 minutes before your regular board meeting, as has been the practice for the board in the past. I have a bunch of slides on the market. I will not bore you to tears with those slides, but I will just give you a very high-level overview. Interest rates kind of hit a high in November. The economic data at that time suggested that the actions that the Federal Reserve were taking were getting inflation under control. However, as the economic data from January came out, core inflation remained stubbornly high. The job market was, the job data was very positive, and the retail numbers were very positive. That hinted that the Federal Reserve can continue to act aggressively in raising the interest rate to try to get inflation under control. And while at the beginning of the year it was expected that the Federal Reserve would maybe pause or raise the overnight lending rate by 1/4 basis point, it's now expected that they will raise the overnight lending rate by 50 basis points in their March meeting. And so rates have kind of ticked up because of that. Really, the market is really going to be hanging on, every word that you'll see from a national level, as well as what the economic data is coming out, and it's very difficult to predict, where the market's going to be, from this week to, a couple of weeks. I will say, though, that, the school district has a very good name in the market, and we expect that there will be substantial demand for the district's bonds. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harrigan. Any questions from the board? Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Thank you so much, Board President Bozay, Superintendent, and members of the board. I have really, really, really basic questions that I just need some explanation of what terms mean and certain other things because I don't understand them, so.
No problem at all.
On page 1, what does residential centrally assessed versus non-residential mean? Can you explain those?
Yes, absolutely. So residential, that's existing home values, residential home values, and then there's non-residential, which is commercial values, and then there's what's called centrally assessed, and centrally assessed are values that the state values those assets, and the reason is because those are assets that will cross county lines, and so the county assessor may not truly know what the value is. It's going to be railroads, oil pipelines, cell phone towers. So the state determines those values and provides those values to the county assessor. You know, generally speaking, an entity that has a large residential tax base, such as Santa Fe Schools, you do not see the fluctuations in your tax base because residential values tend to grow at a pretty stable, you know, rate unless there is a significant financial shock to the system, kind of like what we had in 2009, 2010 when we had the, you know, financial crisis. But generally speaking, you know, home values appreciate year over year, and the district's tax base has grown consistently over the last 7 to 8 years.
Okay, great. So these are all, the assessed valuation is sort of what we're gaining tax revenue from. Okay.
That's correct. So it's your tax base, it's what all of the various governmental entities, you know, within the city of Santa Fe and the remainder of Santa Fe Schools' tax base is based on, and it's effectively a third of the market value.
Okay, great, thank you. And then on the next page, you mentioned like the $4 and change and $1 and change. What are it's $4 like per something, like what do those numbers mean?
It's a good question. So they're expressed in mills, and that is per $1,000 of assessed value.
Okay.
And so if you want to kind of do the math, for every value of say 100,000, your assessed or net taxable value is a third of that, so $33. You divide that by 1,000. And then you multiply that by the tax rate to determine what, you know, the various, you know, tax rates that Santa Fe Schools, you know, levies. There's also, you know, additional taxing entities. There's the state, there's the county, there's the city, there's Santa Fe Community College, and so on and so forth, that all levy property taxes on property owners within the district's tax base.
Okay, this is super helpful. I only bought a house 4 months ago, so this is why this might all be new to me. And then on page 5, the SB 9 election coming up in November of 2023. Is there a recommended amount for that mill levy, or how does that work?
So it's SB 9, or what we call the 2 mill levy. So it's right at 2 mills. So this would just be an extension of the existing mill levy that the district has had in place. You might notice under your tax rates that sometimes it's not quite at $2, and the reason is because of yield control, and the state sets that tax rate so that you will generate the same amount of revenue year in and year out, subject to inflation. Sometimes it's a little bit below $2, but it will never go above what voters authorized, which is $2.
Great, thank you so much. That's all my questions. That was really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right. I think we'll be seeing you soon, as I understand it. Thank you for this information.
Yes,
And,
I'll be back in April.
We'll see you on April 11th or 13th. Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now we can move on to public forum.
Yeah, thank you, Board President Bose, members of the board. With us tonight is our, I wanted to call him Chief Executive Director. I know that's not his title, but he has one of the longest titles, so does Crystal Ibarra. So I don't want to mess up your title. Chief Strategist? Go for it.
Chief Information and Strategy Officer.
There you go. Thank you, Dr. Weaver. Do we have any public forum participants?
Superintendent Chavez, Board President, members of the board, there are no participants signed up tonight.
Thank you very much. I don't think there's anyone in the audience that's waiting to speak tonight. So we will move on to the union update. And I also don't see Grace Mayer here tonight,
No,
President of NEA.
President Mayer may be at the Roundhouse, so.
Yes. So hopefully we will get an update from her at our next meeting. Next item is board announcements and follow-up. And after the board announcements and follow-up, we will do the student board announcements, board member announcements. Yes, Board Member Noble.
Just to say that I can't even remember, I've come completely untethered in time, but I'm going to say it was last Tuesday, February 28th, which happened to be Early Childhood Day in the state legislature in the Roundhouse, but which was wonderful in and into itself. But stealing the show all around was Jen Jevertson and some other members of the Santa Fe Public School team, but mostly the WAVE students that they had there advocating against gun violence. And just to say that having been able to witness that, it was extraordinary. The team from the public schools did a great job, and the students were just out of this world good and really wonderful in learning to advocate and being in the Roundhouse and making it their own. And there, I think, are some photos that appeared on Facebook and other places, but it was just really good.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else?
Can I add
Yes,
on top
please.
of that? Yeah. So that day was special because not only did we have the WAVE students, Jen Jevertson, some of our staff was recognized on the floor, our early childhood students and some of the educators were there alongside Board Member Noble and in her day job. And so, you know, it was almost fully represented by Santa Fe Public School staff, students, and others. So it was a great day.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So I have a couple quick updates about fun events of the week. I was fortunate enough to give out awards at the science and at the STEM fair on Tuesday evening. And also, I guess, just feeling really, really inspired by the students, by their amazing teachers, and all of the district staff that made that. I mean, there were hundreds of people there, and it was just super incredible. And we had 3rd grade through 11th grade receiving awards, and I was reading the things that they did their projects on, and it was just really awesome. And I, you know, as many of them as I could, I said, I can't wait to see what you do next. Like, it's just really exciting, super inspiring. And on another note of my day job, I interviewed an incredible young woman today. She interviewed incredibly well, presented herself incredibly well, and at the end of the interview, I said, well, where did you go to school? And she's a Capital graduate. She went through the medical pathway at Capital. She's a CNA. She's in nursing school. She's 19 years old, and no one in the office would believe that she was 19 because of how incredibly well she carried herself and interviewed, and her skills and her, I mean, we're talking about social emotional. She was talking about emotional regulation as a 19-year-old that I've seen people my age not demonstrate, and it was just incredibly inspiring. And I wanted to share that with my fellow board members and all of the district staff, because to see graduates of our schools out in the real world is really, really amazing. They're incredible people, and so good job, everyone. That's all I have. So we can pass it along to the students.
I think I will be the first to speak. All right. Superintendent Chavez, President Bose, members of the board. Let's see. This last month at Desert Stage Academy, Desert State had a virtual and in-person family engagement poetry night. This event was for kindergarten through 12th graders. Students of all ages and levels read poems to the virtual and in-person audience. Mr. Harden even brought in her sons that played musical sets. Miss Cartina, our K-6 specials teacher, prepared musical pieces with her virtual elementary students. This event had a wonderful turnout of students, parents, and teachers. Events like this bring the community to DSA, and we look forward to the next family engagement event on campus and online. Can take a lot of swigs of water. Right. Desert Shade Academy participated in the district science fair. DSA had many internal winners. For third graders, first place went to Wolfgang Hack with a cat reaction experiment. Second place went to Stephen Zappe, whose project was a candy shop. And in third place was Adrian Sina Bustos, who combined fruits together for taste, smell, and absorb. Honorable mention goes to Juan Trinidad Enriquez. Juan created the farthest Hot Wheels experiment for extracting DNA of fruits. In second place was Alice Ocha with a paper airplane project. And in third place was Jesse Cassius Vega, who with a color shifting project. Honorable mention goes to Nico Ojeda with fighting temperatures. In the fifth grade category, Isaac Loida took first place with an impressive car experiment. Second place goes to Amani Saiz with a slime science. And for sixth graders, Seth Rodriguez performed an experiment with string, testing which twine could support the most weight. Seth Rodriguez won first place. For 7th and 8th graders, Andrew Ortiz and Sebastian Rodriguez took first place with an infinity mirror project. And in 9th place, for 9th grade, in first place was Kathleen Gurel with a project titled KK's Magical Fairy Dust Dish Cleaner. DSA sent 3 students, Sebastian Rodriguez, Andrew Garcia, and Kaylin Gurel, to the district level STEM competition. Go DSA. All right. Desert Shade Academy had its first dual enrollment student pursuing his high school diploma visit an alternative pathway. Samuel Solanos is now a dual enrolled at Early College Opportunities and DSA. As a matter of fact, I think he's in my second period. So Sam is taking auto mechanics as a career focus along with completing his regular coursework at DSA. Sam is also one of DSA's innovative graduation program candidates. He's recovering from several failed courses via this innovative alternative graduation pathway known as IGP. Let's see. Moving on. My home high school, College Opportunities. I don't have. All right. Construction is moving along steadily for ECO's new campus. Work is starting on the new cafeteria/gymnasium, with the building's metal support structure now visible. On February 22nd, UTI, the Universal Technical Institute, came and presented during Wednesday's advisory period. UTI is the nation's leading school for automotive and technical mechanics, and ECO hosted a successful event for the Future-Focused Education, or FFE for short, and its director, Elisa Martinez. During this event, ECO, San Fe High, and Desert Sage presented on SFPS's innovative graduation program, community engagement, and CCTE programming. I didn't put Mendel in this, so I'll let the other two cycle around and then we'll come back to me, all right?
Good afternoon, members of the board, President Bose, Superintendent. I actually have quite a bit today. From starting off with DECA, congratulations to Mr. Aaron Gardner, Mr. Juan Acevedo, and our DECA students, Hayden Ormsby, national qualifier, second place, personal financial literacy, top test score. Emilia Castaneda, elected New Mexico DECA Vice President of Community Service, national qualifier, fourth place, hospitality and tourism operations research. Julie Sitkan and Kaylee Lopez, Abigail Sanchez, third place, chapter banner competition. Brandon Carpio, state finalist, accounting applications. Additionally, Capitol High School DECA was recognized as the highest Thrive level for the DECA membership campaign, DECA chapter campaigns. We had our choir students, our band students, and orchestra students all perform MPA with Miss Alicia Dickinson. Both choirs did a fantastic job performing for MPA last week. Concert choir and treble choir earned a rating of excellent, and we had wonderful workshops with the judges. They were leaving during lunch and commented on how polite all the students were in the halls, opening doors and saying hello. There's also a link, and I'm not too sure what it has. I didn't open it. For our band, congratulations to Mr. Richard Hernandez and our band students. The band received a superior first division rating on stage, and they also received a superior rating on sight reading this year at this year's music performance assessment, which stands for MPA. And this morning, Mr. McGee and our orchestra students, which I am in, went to Santa Fe High, and our advanced orchestra, we just went for feedback and workshops because, unfortunately, weren't able to compete. We didn't have enough songs. And our beginning orchestra received a rating of an excellence and had new experiences with the workshops and judges. I know when we were in one of our workshops, the judge was making us meow, woof, and tap our heads for the beat so that we would find different ways to get the beat without the notes. And that was really fun, and it got a lot of us out of our comfort zone. Some people didn't want to do it, but after a while, the teacher was like doing it with us, so they started getting involved with it too. Our AVID, congratulations to the CHS community for our revalidation as an AVID National Demonstration School. We continue to be the only high school in New Mexico with this distinction. And with our guitar, this was an email from him, so it's like says I and stuff, okay? A truly extraordinary guitar concert last Friday night by the Capitol High School Beginning and Advanced Guitar Ensemble at the St. Francis Auditorium in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Without a doubt, the best concert I have ever presented in my career as a guitar educator. I feel very proud of all my students for their huge effort and dedication to such a beautiful instrument. After the concert, a person I have never met before approached me and told me that he had been extremely impressed with the concert and that he is willing to give brand new classical guitars and guitar cases to one of my advanced level guitar students. Actually, he already bought them. And that is all for Capital. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, or Mr. Superintendent, Madam President, and members of the board. So from Santa Fe High School, both of our advanced choirs traveled to Los Alamos to perform 3 pieces and to do sight reading in front of District 4 judges. Both choirs earned the top score or superior rating from all 3 judges. The concert band and wind symphony performed at the North Central NMMEA Regional Music Performance Assessment. This is the first time in many years that Santa Fe High School has brought 2 concert groups. Both of them played extremely well, and a special congratulations to our wind symphony, which received straight superior ratings from all the judges, including in sight reading. And this was all done while performing it with grade 5 literature or collegiate level. On NJROTC, competed in the Cibola High School MCJROTC military skills meet this past weekend, and we received dozens of awards. We got first in male sprint drag carrier with Emilio Leon, second in overall sporter team, third in female color guard team, outstanding female color guard commander Myra Juarez, second unarmed regulation drill team, outstanding unarmed regulation drill team commander Niven Horvath, first unit uniform personal inspection, and many others. Our Santa Fe High School artists were both actually members of the Santa Fe Site Santa Fe's Young Creators Exhibit and Scholastic Regional Art Show Awards, with Estrella Ortiz and Sofia Hernandez were both curators, and their projects addressed intergenerational trauma. And Sofia spoke at Site Santa Fe's opening night for the student-centered show. And Corey Lee, who's a Santa Fe High School senior, also had 2 pieces in the show. In speech and debate, Josh Almeida, a sophomore, took first place in the New Mexico State Speech and Debate Championships for dramatic interpretation. And senior Nandy Stryker took second place for New Mexico Speech and Debate Championships for humorous interpretations. And I'd just like to congratulate our speech and debate team for all of their hard work. This past week, I shadowed with Dr. Gonzalez at the Roundhouse, where I was able to meet many different senators. I was able to meet Senator Padilla, who's the Senate Majority Whip Leader. Senator Peter Worth actually introduced me on the Senate floor, and he's the Senate Majority Leader. I was also able to meet with Senator Stewart, who's the President Pro Temp, and it was just an awesome experience. I was able to also sit in committees in the Conservation and Technology Committee, which was very exciting. So that was an awesome experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful updates. And yes, lots of music, MPAs. I know my 6th grader was at Santa Fe High yesterday for MPA, and their 6th grade orchestra did exceptionally well. She was very pleased. So go music. Yes, Dr. Gonzalez.
Oh.
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, anybody that says there's not a lot going on in Santa Fe Public Schools, tells us that there's quite a bit going on. So I'm very proud of all you guys.
You certainly make our throats sore. So much to announce. It certainly make our throats sore. All right. By the way, I do know one of the students who performed in the RTC, Myra Ortiz, I think. Yeah. I think she's in my climbing team. So that's cool. Anyway. So for Mandela International Magnet School, for a second year, Mandela has been participating in the Global Scholars Global Cities program. This year, our focus is World of Water. Students have been learning about water issues both locally and globally. After learning about and researching water issues, students students communicate on discussion boards called collaborations with students from around the world. This year we have schools in, there's a long list here, Taipei, Seoul, Buenos Aires, Madrid, Barcelona, Tangona, Spain, Jacksonville, Astana, Kazakhstan, and Pune, India, New York, and lastly, Girona, Spain, in our collaborations. Lots of places. Pretty impressive. Recently, students in the 6th grade period March collaboration had their digital projects from Unit 1 selected by the Global Scholars Team as an exemplar model project. If you are interested in seeing videos by our students, please ask. And students are also just completed research on a water issues in our state and created newspaper titled H2O. So, very nice pun there. Miss Nicholas has done a wonderful job with her 7th and 8th grade students on these projects. The excitement continues to build for Mandela International Magnet Schools in partnership with the Turcha's chapter of Trout Unlimited annual trout release, which is scheduled for early May. You gotta take a quick swig. All right. Grade 7 students will travel to the Rio Grande in the Pillar area to release 52 Rio Grande cutthroat trout fingerlings that have been living in a 125-gallon aquarium since January. Rio Grande cutthroat trout are one of the 2 trout species native to New Mexico, and their population has been greatly reduced due to competition with non-native fish and reduction of suitable habitat. Concurrently, 10 Mandela student grades 7 through 12 are participating in a fly tying enrichment class where they work with volunteers from the TU Turchas chapter to learn how to tie different patterns that are effective in local waters. In addition, they are also learning about proportions, feather structure, and entomology, trout physiology and behavior, and cognitive skills such as sequencing, problem solving, and persistence. Thank you so much to Mr. Larson, who has his work with students in getting to know more about New Mexico's outdoors. 15 sophomores, juniors, and seniors will be traveling with Mr. Grillo and 2 art teachers, Mrs. Ryder and Mrs. M&M, to Oaxaca on March 15th to attend an IB school, stay with host families, and experience Oaxacan culture, history, and as well as improve their Spanish and engage in service learning. Look for updates from the field. All right, that is all from Mandela.
Glad you got a little breather in between those 2 long updates. Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Thank you so much, Board President Bose, Superintendent, and members of the board. You guys are so awesome. You're all so different. Your schools are also different, and we are so, so lucky to have you. Your questions to Dr. Garcia earlier and your updates are always fantastic, so I hope you guys feel at home here and empowered. We just are so lucky to have you, so thank you.
Yes, Ms. Gallegos, go ahead.
I actually forgot one very important thing. In February 19th, we actually had our very first girl state placer for Capitol High for wrestling, and it was SFPS's first girl in Santa Fe at all. So it was Annika Rodriguez, and she just wrestles for our school. She actually attends ATC, but I also forgot to announce that.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that important update. And to echo Vice President Anderson's remarks, it's truly fabulous to have you here. You're wonderful students, and it's great to hear about all of the amazing things that are happening at your schools. All right. Superintendent announcements and follow-up.
Thank you, Board President Bozay, members of the board. You know, we always talk about the thousands of people watching us, so I do want to recognize two. Mary Allen is always watching us, former board member, sending us text messages when she can't hear something. And then also my daughter, Lauren, who watches every single meeting. And she texted me earlier, said, I'm watching again. So both of those, just want to acknowledge both of them for always watching. As we move into my announcements, Ortiz Middle School reopened on February 27th. And I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the Ortiz Middle School staff, led by Principal Felicia Sena, our operations staff, led by Deputy Superintendent Christy Wagner, our technology department, led by Dr. Neil Weaver, our teaching and learning department, led by Deputy Superintendent Romero. It was really a sight to see when you really look at the damage that water main created, or the break in the water main. You know, I also want to thank our incredible Ortiz parents and students for smoothly moving into remote learning and then back into in-person learning. But we're back in business, so just want to tell everybody thank you, appreciate that, and thank the New Mexican for writing, you know, that type of story to cover it. As we're knee-deep in the legislative session, closes in 9 days. We are watching 135 bills, 45 very closely. Just some quick highlights. House Bill 2, which passed the House on February 16th and has undergone hearings at the Senate Finance Committee on Wednesday, February 22nd, as approved by the House. Some of the highlights within it, they're talking about a 5% raise for all educators. There's nearly $8 million in the SEG to raise principals and assistant principal salaries based on the responsibility factor. $8 million for structured literacy. Under special appropriations, there are $40 million for CTE initiatives and equipment, $10 million for community schools, and also want to thank Representative Tara Lujan, who carried a House Memorial Bill to study community schools and also provide additional fundings as that grant expires. $15 million for the highest ranked family income index, $5 million to support math, and $20 million for out-of-school learning, which, you know, we hope to access to provide additional programs during the summer. House Bill 9, unlawful access to firearms by a minor, has passed both houses, and the House concurring with the Senate amendment adds an additional exception to the new crimes created by the bill for circumstances in which a minor obtains a firearm with the authorization of the parent. Affirmative consent, which has passed the House, was given a due pass by the Senate Ed Committee and is awaiting a hearing in Senate Judiciary. House Bill 102, which we were all in support of, as well as NEA. It's the 80-20 bill that covers the health premiums for employees. Again, initially scheduled for a hearing on Wednesday, February 22nd in House Appropriations, and has not been listed on any revised agenda as we've been watching. House Bill 533, school group insurance, was actually submitted to replace 102. It was a bill that the health care insurance for educators has passed the House. The bill passed out of the Senate Ed Committee on Wednesday, March 8th. Next hearing is Senate Finance. The bill was described in Senate Ed as enabling language for funding in House Bill 2 to cover a portion of the insurance costs. And the way it breaks down is it's an 80-20 split for employees who make less than 50. It's a 70-30 split for employees between 50 and 60,000, and it's a 60-40 split for anybody who makes more than 60. So again, it's not what we were looking for. It's a start. It's a move in the right direction. We'll continue to advocate for additional funds and coverage. In a further development yesterday, Senate Bill 521, supplemental salary increase, sponsored by Senators George Munoz and Mimi Stewart, passed the Senate today. The bill will provide a supplemental 1% salary increase for eligible state employees, higher ed employees, and public school employees to offset the inflation. So again, that's a 1% on top of that 5% as it currently stands. There's also in House Bill 125, School Dual Credit Task Force. House Bill 126, graduation requirements, we'll bring that back to you when it's finally approved and signed off, because there are some decisions that we'll have to make as a district, okay? It is, just boils down from requiring 24 to 22, okay? There's some other requirements within it, but once it's approved and moved on, we'll come back with more discussion around that. House Bill 127 increases salary to a base minimum of $25,000. So again, educator salaries will increase as it stands now to a minimum of $25,000. House Bill 130 is changing, so we're just going to wait and see. We're going to look at that. Of course, initially it was 1,140 instructional hours.
All in favor of approving this donation, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And thank you to the partners in education. We appreciate that.
Oh, may I make an announcement? I
Yes,
don't think
please.
we've recognized, but the executive director, Ruth Ann Greeley, is retiring. So they will be looking for a new executive director. Yes. So we may need to bring her forward at some point.
That would be lovely. Item C on the action items is the New Mexico School Board Association Excellence in Student Achievement Award. And as a reminder, the Excellence in Student Achievement Award program seeks to promote student achievement in school districts and assist local school boards in recognizing school leaders, staff, and other individuals who have played an important role in improving student achievement at the local level. The NMSBA gives us one award, and the additional awards, the district picks up the cost for at $50 an award. The recipient is either an individual or a group that played an important role in improving school achievement at the district level. Recipients may include the following: school board member, administrators, teachers, staff members, parents, community members, or volunteers. The deadline is tomorrow, and I think we've all submitted some names, and Board Secretary Abeta and Vice President Anderson kind of vetted those with the superintendent, and I would like the superintendent to speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Board President Bose. We did meet, they reviewed it, added some other individuals. Again, we're not announcing the names tonight. This is just for you guys, for your reference, and then we would bring them back whenever we're going to present them with their award. So again, what you have in front of you are the names that have been gathered, not only from you guys, but other staff members. So we ask for approval of the list of nominations. And again, this is just your documents. We'll announce it when we set the date for their awards.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I prematurely told someone to listen when I just wanted to note, and I mentioned this to Superintendent, so he knows that I'm probably going to say this. I did nominate some of these people. It just got mixed up with President Bose, so there are a few on here. I promise I did nominate some folks. So.
Internal document.
Internal document only.
Not
but just
accurately
so
reflecting all of the
just so our fellow board
nominations.
members who have it in front of them know, I did. I promise.
Dr. Gonzalez, did you have a question, comment? Okay. So can we have a motion to accept these nominations?
I move that we accept these nominations.
I second.
Thank you very much. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. And we're on to advanced planning. We will meet again on March 30th. That is our committee's study session. Yes?
Just to say, there's no way I can make that meeting. I don't know if it's at all possible that we could move things around even the day before. I know that's often a CRC night. Anyway, I'm sorry.
It's not CRC night. I don't.
But I have that class that I can't miss. I'm
Wednesdays.
so sorry, Wednesdays.
Yeah.
But other days that week I could do.
Yeah.
I think I can do Tuesday.
Tuesday works for me.
there's a,
what?
basically my.
The committee's meeting
Rather than
on
March
March
30th, that is there's a large event, retirement or celebration for
Yeah.
growing up New Mexico. There's nothing I can do.
You
I can't
literally
get
have
here.
to be there.
On the 30th, so, and I would very much like to be there. The 28th would work. Anyway, I'm sorry about that, but I can't make the 30th.
Does the 28th work for the rest of the board?
Works
It
for
works
me.
for me, and it's very important that Board Member Noble be there, that we all be there. Okay. Let's do that on the 28th then. The CRC will not be meeting next week in anticipation of that study session. So that is a change to the advanced planning. We all got that email today, I believe, or yesterday. Anything else on advanced planning? Okay. March 28th it is then. Thank you. Of course. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. We are adjourned.
Oh, good, glad you're coming, Carmen. It should be fun.
What's that?
It should be fun.
Yeah. I've been seeing her quite a bit at the Roundhouse. And now she's going to be on the board of Reading Quest.
Yes.
So she went,
Are you on that board?
no, but I met with them and the senator to try and get some money there.